Hello, everyone. Welcome. How's everyone doing in the chat? Just getting started here. But today we are doing a lesson. This is Michiko here, who's actually quite a big fan of ours. I'm very happy to have you here. Michiko redeemed a one-on-one lesson with a sensei that's available for 100,000 dojo gold. Which is not easy to achieve. A lot of people watch all the time and they're like nowhere near. Actually, I want to ask, did you gamble at all to get to 100K?
I'm a very good predictor. In fact, I put 18K down today, so I'm hoping that I can redeem. And then Jesse left the stream before they paid it out. I'm a very good predictor.
Did Jesse make it? What was the bet?
Would he reach 2,700 in the stream?
Oh, I see. Did he make it or? No, not yet. Not yet.
No.
That's cool. Well, yeah, great to have you. And I just want to say I really appreciate like all the support and always being like in our chat and watching. It's great to just have lots of people like always in chat and being positive.
Oh yeah.
So that's much appreciated.
You guys deserve it. You guys do a great job. Varied content and so helpful and instructive.
Thanks so much. So today we're going to be doing kind of like a beginner king and pawn endgame lesson. I think king and pawn endgames are a few things, but they're tricky. They're really easy to mess up. And I also think they're very important. They're very critical. Like some of the positions we're going to look at today, have shown up in thousands and thousands of games in history. And they're definitely one of the types of positions that I often see players mess up. Players of much higher rating than what we would consider a beginner as well. It's just so easy to mess up these positions from both sides, and sometimes we'll see games where it's like mistake, like both players messing it up back and forth. So hopefully it'll be some good practice for Michiko, but also for everyone else that struggles with these endgames. I will warn, some of the advanced players that like this is going to just be like really beginner review stuff. So there might not be a lot for you in this stream if you're like super comfortable with king and pawn against king. But I don't know. I think this lesson is so important that I think it's definitely worth doing. Let's do them blindfold. Yeah, actually, if you want to like challenge yourself, just minimize this stream and try to calculate. That actually would be a good way for stronger players to get something out of this. Okay, so with that said, I actually want to start with a different position here. Let me put white's king over here, and I'm going to put white's pawn over here, and let me actually take black's king off the board. First, let's talk a little bit about king and pawn endgames and like what we're generally trying to achieve. So, question for you, Michiko, what do you think is typically the goal in a king and pawn endgame?
I imagine it's to promote.
Absolutely right. 100%. When there are no pieces left on the board, you're just left with pawns, and without promotion, you're not going to win the game. You need a queen to checkmate, or at least a rook. But okay, usually we promote to queen. So king and pawn endgames are, I would say, about two main things specifically. In no order, they're both extremely important. One is your pawns. You want to promote your pawns. And in that respect, pass pawns are very strong. Number two, you want your king to be active. And this is the one that I think most players will mess up because it's just something we forget about. Pawns are obvious. If a pawn is advancing, it's more active. The closer it is to the promotion square, the stronger it is. That is simple to understand. But let me ask you again, what do you think it means to have an active king? Like, what does it mean for a king to be active?
Well, I mean, in the end game, it's doing work, like it's being a defender.
So when you say defender, what do you mean by that?
It's like, it eats pieces if it can get to pieces, and it blocks things that can't check it, and it protects like the pawn here. Like here, it's protecting the pawn, so he's not just stuck, in the corner like in the middle game or the beginning. Right.
No, so that's absolutely right. That you said the king can capture pieces, which is very important. That is a thing players forget. I mean, it's so obvious, but I've definitely seen players forget that their king can capture stuff. And sometimes, like, you know what happens? Someone puts a queen next to a king, and then the king doesn't take it. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, well, most likely, but I'm pretty good about knowing my king can be a defender because I get myself in a position where I have to defend a lot. So I've just learned that.
That's good. Okay, good. So the king can capture stuff. The king can also defend stuff. So that's very important. As you noted, the white king is defending this pawn. And that means that if black tries to capture it with a piece, let's say some bishop or some knight, then the king would be able to win material. The king having this role where it attacks squares is also important because the kings fight against each other. So, of course, a king can never check another king, but the kings do fight against each other because they take away squares from each other, right? Any square that the white king is attacking, the black king can't go, he can't touch. So this is kind of a nice pattern to, let's say, keep in mind, because we could put black's king anywhere on the board, and white's pawn would be promoting. There'd be no way to stop white's pawn, because white's king is just covering all of the key squares that the defending king can use. There's no way to touch white's king. There's no way to touch the pawn. So we could put black's king here on b5, but nothing to do. The pawn is defended. So one theme we'll see in like pretty much every king and pawn endgame we look at is that the kings are always going to be fighting against each other by trying to take away squares. And in general, taking away more and more space. Okay, let's jump to a different position. Let me put black's king here, and we'll put white's king here. So just to actually clarify this last point, we can put black's king anywhere, and black can safely resign because white's next move is pushing the pawn, promoting, and then I have to ask, do you know how to checkmate with a king and queen?
Not on purpose. Yeah. I mean, I've practiced it a few times, but I would probably freak out if I were in that position. Like, I'm not confident with it. No.
Okay, good. I appreciate the honesty, because it is very important, and of course everything we look at, it's kind of moot if you can't actually checkmate with the queen that you're gonna achieve. We won't look at that now because I think that's something that, like, there are so many videos on it, and really the main way to learn it is to practice it. So the homework I would give to you after this lesson is to watch at least one video on how to checkmate with a king and queen. I'm sure if you YouTube it, I'm sure there's just like 1,000 videos that will basically do the trick, and then practice it as many times until you're bored of it, until it's just like so easy for you that you could literally do it like eyes closed. Now you actually have to visualize, but it's just like very, very fast for you. Just quick. Okay. The way to practice a lot of these endgames, actually, you can play them against the computer. And this is the only time that I think anyone in ChessDojo would recommend using the computer. But playing these against the computer is good because you just get like a simple sparring partner. And if you play it out correctly, then you'll checkmate the computer every time. And if you mess up, then the computer will defend correctly every time. So it's kind of like hitting a ball against the wall. It's like a good practice for a chess player.
Okay.
So, all right, let's go on. Then, of course, king and rook versus king, also very, very important, but one step at a time. Let's take a look at a position like this. I'll give you in chat just a little time here just to kind of try to absorb what's going on. We're seeing this from white's point of view, so white's pawns are pushing up, black's pawns are coming down. And I think this is just a good type of position to illustrate kind of a couple of things. But number one, let's say the power of the king and how the king can really dominate another king. Okay, let me first ask you, which side do you think you would rather be here?
I guess white, because black can only black is pretty close to getting stuck behind his own pawns, whereas white is kind of more free.
Absolutely. Yeah, so white's king basically has access to like this entire section of the board. Not that that's necessarily needed, because all the action is taking place here, let's say, where the pawns are. But the problem for black is that with white's king being this far up, the king is kind of confined to this little area. And the thing about chess that is, again, like very fundamental and obvious, but I think people maybe don't appreciate the importance, is that you have to make a move. You always have to move something. And when you're down to few pieces on the board in the endgame, or if you're down to just the kings, the king always has to make a move, and the king can't always advance, especially if the enemy king is extremely active and taking away a lot of the squares that you would want to go to. So if it's black to play in this position, what are black's options? The king either goes to f8 or g7 or g8, and all of these squares are actually giving up some ground. So let's say it was black to move in this position. Black tries some move like king to f8. How do you think white should continue here? How would you play this out?
Oh, king to e6.
Yeah, actually, why don't you make the move?
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, and what's your idea here?
Well, now the black king can only move, like, if he does opposition, I'll just take the pawn. And well, no matter what he does, I'll take the pawn.
Well, let's see. So black is going to try to defend the pawn. You're absolutely right. If this move, here the opposition is of very little importance, because your idea was not to get opposition. Your idea was just to take the pawn. So you're just taking, right. And if you want to play this super safe, you can take all the pawns next and slowly advance your 3 pawns, and eventually one of them will promote. Try not to stalemate. One of them will promote. Yeah. Also a good position just to practice against like a training partner, or you can set it up against an engine, because with best play, white should win, but it's a good one to practice to kind of get all the mistakes out. Well, black has one way of defending the pawn. Black can go king to g7.
Now what I don't want to get too far away, so I would have to go like that.
Excellent. King d7, absolutely correct move. You're just keeping your attack on the pawn. And now it's black to play again, and again black has to make a move.
Oh, he can't. Yeah, he's got to go up, or yeah, because he can't go closer to my pawns because he'd be in check, so he's got to go farther.
Exactly right. So this square is taken away. This square is taken away by your king, and black cannot stay on this square because it's black's turn. So this is a classic example of where if black could just pass, like not make a move, that would be the preferred choice. Okay, so we have a special word for this kind of situation. You may have heard it. I'm sure it comes up all the time. It's this German word Zugzwang.
Correct. I have heard it.
Good. Zugzwang is probably like, I think, one of the most critical themes in the endgame. It shows up in many different positions because, it's maybe this is a simple example of it. Basically, again, because black has to make a move, they actually have to let go of this pawn, and because of that, black loses the position. So it's actually a very important rule for chess that you have to make a move. If you could just pass, this position would be a draw. There would be no way for white to do anything. Cool. So the important thing to recognize here is that white's king is basically bullying black's king by taking away this critical square. So now the king has to leave, and white can just start mopping up pawns, and game is over.
Hey, get away from me, king. Okay. Yeah.
So let's go back a step. We had this original position where it was black to move, and with black to move, white was already able to take space and get closer to black's pawns, and white slowly inched forward. Let me put king g7 here as our main line. And again, another position where black had to give space, and this allowed white to finally take and win. But let's say it was white to move in this position. How would you try to keep the advantage here? And let me actually switch it over. Okay, so now white is able to move. How would you try to get in?
Well,
Just king d6. Exactly. And black is actually just in the same situation as before. Your king is threatening to invade. And black can keep control over this square, but cannot keep control over e6. Next move, white's king is coming in. And we basically have another situation here. Okay, you can even come in this way, or king e6. Both moves are good. Black can't hold on to the pawn. Or if black tries to be a little bit clever here, let's say king to f8. How would you play this one out as white? Why don't you make... you'll make white's moves, and I'll try to defend.
Yeah. I'm still just going to do this.
Absolutely. King here. And king e7, and again, it's game over. Yeah, black can resign. Exactly. So what's going on here is that even though it was white to move, it was black to move, it doesn't really matter. The point is that white's king has access to more squares, and you're always just timing the other king out. The king just can't stay in one place at the same time. So you're just waiting the king out and coming in. So this is what I think, yeah, a lot of people would call this shouldering, where you're just kind of boxing the king out. Another very important term, it comes up a lot. And if we add pieces to the board, this is still a thing, you know, that happens. The kings, they like kind of box against each other, fighting for key squares. Okay, let's clear the board again. So you nailed this one. Great job. Let me put this position on the board. So this one is, we're going to start getting into the really critical stuff. I would say if you understand this position, you can then understand like hundreds of other positions that one day stem down into this one, if that makes sense. This is like the fundamental bedrock of like all king and pawn endgames.
Okay.
So most important question in this position, maybe someone in the chat will ask, is who is it to move? That's the most important question. So the evaluation of this position, whether white wins or whether it's a draw, depends very much on who actually has to move at this exact moment. And so why is that? So let's quickly break this down. Well, first let's start with white. Let's say it's white to move. Our king is holding on to this pawn. Of course, we cannot come here. And we have to move our king, so only square to keep our pawn defended is this one.
Yeah.
And then after king e6, where is black going to play here?
Black can't do anything at this moment.
That's right. So what do we have?
Stalemate.
Stalemate, exactly right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about stalemate real quick. Are you comfortable with stalemate? Are you familiar with the idea?
I'm very comfortable with it because it happens to me all the time. We go way back, and I. No, I wish I could avoid it.
Are you usually on the side of delivering the stalemate?
No, I turn complete winning positions into a stalemate.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's not the good side. That's okay. That is very, very common. The number one tip, I guess, I would give to players. Some people say, like, to avoid stalemate, you know, you should always give checks. I don't really like that advice because I don't think you should always give checks. I think there's lots of positions where if you're trying to checkmate the opponent's king, it's better not to give checks. I'll just give a really, really quick one. We'll come back to this in a sec. But let me just clear this off the board. Let me put white's king here. Let me put white's queen somewhere here. And let me put the rook somewhere here. So let's say we have this position, kind of typical. We have a bunch of extra material. Maybe there's like other pieces on the board. But usually when we're stalemating, it's because the opponent is left with an empty king and we take away all the squares, but we don't checkmate. So here, if you just followed like the always give checks rule, then okay, you have lots of checks, but it's going to be hard to actually like set up a checkmate. You're basically just going to have to randomly walk into it. So let me ask you, what would be, do you think, the most efficient way to try to checkmate black? How would you try to trap black's king here?
I mean, just confine him to that last, what is that file? Mm-hmm. Like by moving either the queen or the rook, but I would say queen so he can't get closer. Great. Queen first.
Great instinct. So yeah, where would you put the queen here?
C7.
Okay, absolutely right. Yeah, queen c7. And your next move, I presume, is just going to be checkmate.
Yes.
So exactly right. And in fact, in the game, you could already pre-move your rook because, like you mentioned, the king cannot approach your queen, so your queen is safe.
Yeah.
It's kind of this funny quality that both the queen and the king share, but no other piece. The king can approach any other piece, which is interesting. And so this move is exactly right, and the other moves you kind of alluded to. So you could also play here, and that would be perfectly fine, and you could play rook b7, and that would be totally good as well. But I'm 100% with you. I would lead with the queen, because the queen is kind of the stronger piece. You even defend this square. And so this is like just easy example where it's better not to give checks. It's more about taking squares away from the enemy king, and all you need to like calculate here is that the king has one safe move. So this is how you avoid stalemate. You just find one safe square for the king, and as long as you can see that the king has at least one square, then you're not in danger. So of course you have to be very careful. You have to make sure you don't have a bishop, covering this square by accident. And
oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened. The bishop was there, yes, the other day.
I know, yeah. I've seen it happen many times, and it's mainly about just being cautious. Especially when you're winning, it's so easy to relax.
Because I get excited and I just go, and then I just have to slow down and stop and think about if the king has a space.
Absolutely right. And I think you can totally do it. It's all about just remembering to slow down. It's just about kind of not losing focus in that moment and just having this kind of red alert in the back of your mind, like, oh, avoid stalemate, always give a square, always give a square. Okay, so let's go back to the king and pawn endgame. So we had this position, and so what we determined was that if it's white to move, the only way to hold on to this pawn, if we go back here, any other move black just takes and makes a draw, is to play here and put the king in stalemate.
Yeah.
So if you have this position, or for example, let's say this position, basically it's the same thing, or we can move everything over to a file, same thing. If it's white to move, it's a draw. We can move everything over a file. If it's white to move, it's a draw. We can also switch colors because I think it's important to kind of see these things from both sides. If it's black to move in this position, it's a draw, right? So the thing is, it's like the pawn is kind of extended. The king is holding on to the pawn. The defending king is in front of the pawn. And the only way to keep it defended is that stalemate. Okay, so with the we'll call it the stronger side. The pawn with the side with the extra pawn is the stronger side. The defending side is like the weaker side. So that's how we'll kind of refer to it, because it doesn't matter white or black. What we're thinking about is the stronger side, the side with the pawn versus the defending side. So the side with the pawn is trying to promote, if it's your turn to move in this position, you have to make a draw. Let's see what happens if it's the defending side to move. Well, where can the white king move in this position?
Well, to F2.
And is that the only move?
Yes.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So if it's the white king to move in this position, king has to go to F2, and this would allow black's king to advance. And because the king gets to this key, second rank, seventh rank, that means next the pawn is promoting, and there's nothing white's king can do to stop it.
Right.
So game over. So that means that if it's the defender to move in this position, the evaluation is that the pawn promotes. Black should win. Okay, so that's kind of the critical evaluation for this position, and that's why it really matters. The most important thing is whose turn is it once we get here. So if it's black to move, black loses. If it's white to move, draw. Okay, so let's pull it back one move. Let's say we had this position, and it's white to move. So let me ask you this, without moving any pieces, if it's white to play in this position, what will be the evaluation? Does white win, or is it going to be a draw?
Well, I think it's going to be a draw. if
Okay.
it's white to move.
So how would this play out?
Well, if white moves the pawn up to e7, it's just over. So I guess what would happen if we tried to move the king like to g7? No, because then the king, black king, would come to e7 and get you away from your pawn. So I think it's just over.
So you're saying if white pushes the pawn, where does black play there?
He can't. He can't. Oh, wait. If white pushes the pawn, black goes to d7.
Mm-hmm.
And black loses.
Black loses, right?
That's right.
So
we just did that. Okay.
No, that's okay. Well, that's why we're taking this really slow, because it gets really tricky, because you got to kind of count tempos, and it's really easy to kind of fall into the trap of like e7. Oh, my pawn is blocked. I can't do anything. Where in fact it's e7. Oh, black is dead because black has to get out of the way, and we're advancing. So this is kind of like, we can call it, I don't know, immortal zugzwang, because this is a position that's just like so important to understand. It's also, I would say, a mutual zugzwang, because white doesn't want to move. If it was white to move in this position, we lose our advantage, we draw the game. Black, of course, does not want to move anyway, and that's a win. So with white to play in this position, we're winning, because we get this and black has to move. We have our key position with the defender to move. Okay, let's adjust it a little bit further. Let's put the king here. Oops. On f8. All right, it's white to play again. And without moving the pieces, what do you think should be the evaluation? Does white win, or are we getting a draw?
White's going to win this one, because white will move the pawn to e7, and then that king, even if the king moves in front of the pawn, oh wait, no, then it's white's turn. It's going to be, well, if the king does something stupid and goes to g7, then white will win. But if the king goes in front of the pawn, sorry, I'm not quick with the notation. Then it's going to be a
yeah, I got what you're saying. Yeah. So you're saying we're getting to that stalemate position.
Yes.
Absolutely right. Yeah, if it's white to play here, we can give the check, king to e8, and oops, it's our turn in the critical position. It's a draw. So it's kind of ironic. Even though we get the check, we actually don't win the game. In fact, we want to advance. Are they making
fun of me in chat because I'm so bad at this?
No, not at all. Not at all. Anyone who says anything in chat is immediately getting accosted by other members of chat. So the chat can take care of themselves. No, people appreciate the beginner streams that we do, because most of our content, I would say, is for much, much higher level. And so, yeah. And I mean, this stuff, again, like I've seen at this point in my career, counting online games and like in-person games that I've seen with like kids and stuff and like adult beginners, like these end games are just like messed up back and forth, like wrong move from white, wrong move from black, just back and forth. So I just think it's so critical that, I don't care about stronger players right now. You guys can go do some tactics while we review this. So, okay, what we've determined is that with white to move here, black is actually in time, assuming, of course, black plays the best moves, which we want to try to assume in our analysis that like both sides are playing best possible moves, because we're getting this position and, again, stalemating. And so this brings us to maybe the first kind of like important case of the opposition, because here it actually does matter that the kings are kind of opposing each other. Okay, let me ask you same question. What is the evaluation of the position? Is white winning, or is it a draw if we have this position, but it's now black to move? So try to kind of like count it out what happens here.
Yeah, black is going to go in front of the white's going to win, I think, because black will go in front of the pawn on e8 to try to stop the pawn. Then the pawn will go e7, and then black will go d7, and white will promote and win.
Yeah. In fact, it's like a mathematical proof. Once you get e7 and it's black to play, you can stop there because it's understood that white is winning. Black has to get out of the way. White's king advances and white promotes. Then, okay, again, normal disclaimer, you have to know how to mate with king and queen. Otherwise, all this, like, it won't end up useful. But that's not always true because some players, they actually resign without letting you or forcing you to play it out. So you might get away with some. But lesson to the chat, always play it out because who knows, your opponent might not be super comfortable. Okay, so with black to play, you just said white wins, which is correct.
Yes.
Okay, so in this position with black to play, black loses. With white to play, it's going to be a draw.
Stalemate, yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is where it's like the opposition is kind of important because it's like the kings are opposing each other and one of the sides basically has to give ground. White doesn't really want to advance the pawn before the king advances, but the king has no way to approach, and black does not want to kind of get out of white's way either. Okay, let me put this king over here on d8, and I'm going to ask you kind of a different question here. What should white play?
I think white should move the king first. I think white has to play king to f7.
Mm-hmm. So that is definitely the right move. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then the king has to scoot away a little bit. It has to go. That black king can't go closer.
Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, actually, it doesn't even matter whether black moves or not because your king is kind of shepherding the pawn forward no matter what.
And I win.
Exactly.
Yes.
White wins. So this is a case where if you advanced with the pawn, then black would actually get in front of the pawn.
Stalemate.
And we'd have to make a draw. So we're kind of seeing hidden rule about this type of position. As the stronger side, you want your king in front of the pawn because you can kind of like take space before the pawn starts advancing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a really important thing. So let's back the position up a bit. So we're basically going backwards here. We're starting from the end. Let's take this position. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get this one right because we had this before the class even started and you got the right move. But what do you think white should do here?
I'm going to say opposition. I'm going to say king to e6.
King e6, very good. That's the right move. In general, I would say like taking the opposition is a good instinct. It might not always be the right move and you might not even always understand why it's the right move, but often it will be the right move. Now, that doesn't mean always take the opposition, and it doesn't mean it's the most important thing, but it's a good instinct to have. Let's put it that way. Let's see what happens here after white plays king to e6. Notice that the king is advancing in front of the pawn. We'll break this down later, but let's just say for now, if white pushed the pawn and black got immediately in front of it, this position is now a draw. Doesn't matter who's to move here. But we'll come back to this one. So the important thing is that white always wants to put the king in front of the pawn here, and you do want to take the opposition. Now it's black to move. So these squares are, of course, taken, and the king has to pick a side. Let's just choose one at random here. And the king gets out of the way, and so this allows white to advance. So where would you continue from here?
Wow. I almost want to go the other way. Because let me think this through. Because if I go F7, I'm just in the F. Let me see here. Mm-hmm. If I take opposition here, then I'm just gonna put myself in that same boat, right? But what if I go king? If I go king d7, even if that guy moves, then I can still move the pawn up because he can't go near it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Is it?
Absolutely right.
Hey.
Nice. Great job.
Okay.
Yeah, so with king d7, your king now controls all these squares. And now it doesn't matter where the king is. As long as the king can't just immediately take your pawn right now because it's undefended, looks like not possible, then your pawn is just advancing. You can close your eyes. You can pre-move pawn up all the way to e8. There's nothing black can do to stop it. So this is, okay, very basic example. You absolutely nailed it, where opposition is completely irrelevant here. The point is not to get opposition. The point is to advance your king and promote your pawn. And in this aim, opposition is very useful, but it's not like, oh, so I have seen positions that just go like this. My king goes back, and then white's like, oh, wait, I can't do that.
Oh, wait.
That's a draw. And then white advances, and this position, we already looked at it before. It's white to play. What is the evaluation here with white to play?
White to play, that will be a draw.
Very good. King, pawn up, king here, and we have that critical position with white to move. We have to give a stalemate. So I've definitely seen this exact scenario play out. Like white plays it beautifully, achieves a winning position, and then just doesn't quite understand the point, keeps taking the opposition, and then like, wait, how am I, like, doesn't understand why they're not winning, right? And then like, okay, I guess I got to push my pawn and draw. Thousands of games like this.
Yeah.
It's tragic. So of course the real goal is to get the king to this kind of touchdown area.
Right.
And that's game over. Okay, so let's take a step back and let's try to understand why this position then is actually going to be a draw no matter what. The reason for that is white's king is not getting in front of the pawn as long as black just continues to shuffle and box. So the way to play these as a defender is very simple. You keep your king in front of the pawn as actively as possible. Active means, you know, forward. If you're not able to, let's say for example it's black to move in this position, you're not able to approach and you're not able to stay, then you put your king in front of white's king. You take the opposition.
Yeah.
And so from here, white has to do something. Your next move is going to be king e6, choice number 1, if possible. If not, choice number 2, king e7. And then that's it. That's just all you need to know as a defender. You keep your king in front of the pawn. You take the pawn if it's hanging. And if you can't keep your king in front of the pawn, you keep your king in front of the other king. You try to take opposition. So let's see how this would play out. White's king now can't approach. So white has to push the pawn. Where do you think black should play?
E7.
Yep, just choose the most active square you can find.
Mm-hmm.
King here. Okay, how would you continue for black?
Oh gosh, just back. E8.
E8,
Just stay in front of the pawn. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, just stay in front of the pawn. And what this allows you to do as a defender is meet white's king.
Yeah.
In fact, if black had chosen a different move, one of these two, black would then lose. We can just play this quickly out. King here, white takes the opposition, and now we actually have like the key position just a couple of moves away. So king has to go here, white pushes, and game over.
Yeah.
Everything clear so far? Any questions on this?
No, this is good.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I also want to just practice this one out a couple times. We'll play it out.
Okay.
It actually can get trickier, and so you will need to kind of like keep this skill in mind of kind of counting tempos. You know, seeing like you're gonna play here, and then the other king will have to do something, and then your continuation. But let's keep going back, and let's say we have. Actually, what I want to do is I want to do a different endgame here. I'm going to give white an extra g-pawn, basically an extra doubled pawn. And I want to look at this position. Okay. So let me ask you, with white to play, what do you think should be the evaluation? Is white winning or is it a draw?
Well, if that other pawn weren't there, I would say white. It's white's gonna win if it's white to play. So white's gonna win either way.
Excuse me. Yeah, white was actually I messed this one up. I want to put the king. That's my bet. I want to put the king here. Let me ask you the same question.
So then I'll say, ordinarily, I would say it would be a draw, but we have that extra pawn here, which I have no idea how that would be helpful, but apparently it's going to be helpful because it's there.
Good intuition.
So I'm gonna say, in this case, white's going to win somehow.
Okay, that's right, but I do want you to try to understand, why that is. So let's try to play it out in your mind. White is going to push the pawn. Black king goes here.
Mm-hmm.
And then what can white try in that position?
Advance the other pawn.
Sure.
It's stuck behind that pawn now. Okay, so I'm just going to advance the other pawn to G4.
Okay. And then, where do you think? Well, let's actually visualize this one. So, we're giving this check.
Okay.
King is going here. Then you're saying you'll just push the pawn, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so, where will black go from there?
Well, from there, black can't, I guess, just to the side of my pawn, then I win. I mean, to H7.
Mm-hmm. Then your king advances and white wins.
Then, yeah, I win either way. So that other pawn is almost irrelevant, right?
So what is the role of the pawn? Yeah, because white is winning this one. If we push, and then we move the pawn, black has to move, and our king advances, and the king has to.
That's the role of the other pawn that
Although,
turns.
I would say actually white has to be a little careful here. So this is, I guess, maybe a very common way to stalemate when we promote without realizing that that we're leaving the king without a square.
What if you promote to knight? Would that work?
If you promote to a knight, you're still winning. But I would say actually the simplest way to kind of solve this problem is to just kind of jettison your other pawn now that you're
I see.
promoting. Yeah. So that's kind of a nice trick that black has in this position, but as long as white doesn't fall for the trick, is winning. You could also promote to a rook, and I got an alt because I got auto queen on. You can also promote to a rook, and then either you know how to checkmate with a king and rook, you can win that, or you can use your rook to promote your pawn and then checkmate with the rook and queen.
Yeah.
Okay, so then question for you. So what was the role of this pawn in this endgame?
To make me feel more comfortable. Well, if not, I think it will help you avoid stalemate by being able to bully the king a little bit and make it move so he has space to move. Like he would have had to move to H, whatever that was, 4 or 5 to get out of.
Yeah, so how is it, like, let's say, affecting this key position?
I'm not exactly sure, except he can just come up and check the king, right? And then
maybe thinking about it a little bit too deep. You actually kind of already had it. You understood that if we had this position without the pawn, it's a draw. Because white's king has to move here, and that's just a stalemate. With the pawn, white is winning.
it gives them an extra move. It gives them an extra move to.
Yeah, exactly right. It's the value of having one extra move. Even just
Right.
G3 here accomplishes the same task. In fact, it might even be cleaner because, as you remember, this pawn on G4 played a role in that vicious stalemate earlier. So G3 would keep your pawn away, and then you can promote to a queen without worrying about the king.
Nice.
So it's this value of the extra move that actually completely changes the evaluation. It also means that white wins no matter whose turn it is in this key position. Because if it's black to play, then black is moving. And if it's white to play, then you're wasting a move. We call this a waiting move. You can also say you're wasting a move. And this is actually the strategy when you have an extra piece. So for example, let me give you...
So the fact that it's fact that it's a pawn is irrelevant. It's just any old piece, right?
Exactly
that
right.
You could, okay.
Yeah. So that's actually the next thing. Let me give you a bishop and ask you to try to win this position with white.
Bunkhouse. Okay. Do you want me to do it or just?
Yeah, let's play it out. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. Let's just do this.
Okay.
Wait, what happened here?
Uh-oh, you promoted.
Wait. Did I want to move my king first? Yeah. I wanted to move my king first, right?
Mm-hmm. King F7, good. I'll go here.
Yeah. A crucial step.
Queen. And I still have a move. It's not stalemate, so I resign. Very good.
Yes. Okay.
Now, so basically this bishop was just there to make a move when you needed it to.
Okay.
That's its only role because it actually doesn't attack the promotion square. So light squared bishop, you can just bully the king out. You'll promote your pawn easy. Or with a knight, you don't need to resort to these fancy waiting tactics. Your knight can just bully the king and you can promote easy. But with a dark squared bishop, its only value is that it can make a move for you in the critical position, which is this one. There was actually a way to go wrong here. Maybe strong players, this could be a fun question for you. What would be the only way not to win this for white? And that would be bishop here. It's still winning. It's just that if you follow up naturally, we actually get a funny version of the stalemate. Where the bishop is covering the square. So this was maybe the one way to go wrong in this position, and that would be quite unfortunate. But let me ask you this. Let's say we have this position. Let's say your bishop is here, and you've just realized to your horror that this is a stalemate. How would you adjust and try to win from here?
Just move the bishop first. The other king still has to move.
Mm-hmm.
So just get the bishop out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Just basically move the bishop somewhere. King will come back here, and now you just got to do the same thing again. Have to make another waiting move, more careful one, and now, of course, you can readjust. That's the other thing about these endgames. A lot of times you might blow it once, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's over. You might be able to kind of retrace your steps and figure it out. Okay, so yeah, this bishop here is a fantastic piece. Let me just put another position on the board real quick to kind of cement the theme here. Let's do this position.
Oh boy.
And here, okay, we're kind of in, so it's funny, this is what a real stalemate looks like when both kings are kind of locked together. But with white to play with this extra piece, you can never attack the pawn. But what can you do here to try to win this one?
I mean, I can just move it because that will force that other side to have the black piece, one of the black pieces to have to move while mine still get to stay together. So just move it.
Move your
bishop.
Bishop, gotcha. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter where, literally any move you can make with white's bishop. Again, just a key waiting move. This bishop will never win the pawn for you, but the fact that it can move means your king is winning the battle. Without this bishop, white's king would have to move. White would actually be losing because white would be losing their pawn because no way to stay in touch. But here it's black's king that has to move. Your king takes, and black's king is actually horribly misplaced, can't even get back in front of the pawn. But that doesn't really matter here because you have an extra bishop anyway. Even if the king was here, you would still be able to win that.
Right.
Okay, so let's see. I don't want to do too much because I feel like we've covered a lot already. And again, the main thing about these endgames is that it's all about like practicing and drilling them. I do want to quickly revisit the king and pawn endgame, if that's cool. If you have time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, let's first review this position. Actually, let me bring it back here. It's not really a review because we actually haven't looked at this position yet, but it's similar. Let's take a look at this position here. Let's say it's white to play. How do you think we should try to win this one?
Opposition first, so like king to f5.
King f5, exactly right. Okay, as a defender, what do you think black should do?
Try to move in front of the pawn, not away from the action. So, and you can't move to the, so e7.
Okay, king e7, good. And how would you continue with white?
I'm going to bring the pawn up because they got to stay together to e5.
King e5. Okay, and now...
No, wait. Pawn to e5.
Oh, sorry, pawn to e5 you wanted.
Yeah.
So this one is actually kind of blowing it for white, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because now black king swings back.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well then don't do that.
Yeah, of course.
Do what you said. Oh yes, opposition. We just did this one. Okay.
That's okay. No, that's fine.
I'm gonna go do those drills like you said, and then you'll see this in a tournament game, and I'm gonna nail it.
That's exactly the goal. No, because it just takes practice. I've probably shown this, to like countless students over the years, and everyone messes it up their first 5 times. Even though it's just something about it, right? It's simple, but there's lots of little variations, and if you shift one piece to one square, it can change the evaluation. So that's why these are so tricky. It's like you really have to be very, very on point. So here, okay, white takes the opposition again. Because there's no way to advance, that's why we need this like second. You need the central opposition. Let's put it that way. Now the king has to get out of the way, or let's say the king tries to stay kind of in front of the pawn. White's king then advances.
Yeah.
And now there's no way to keep the king from our kind of touchdown zone. Anywhere the king moves, white's king is coming in, and then the pawn is just running forward. Okay, so what this means is that this position is another one of those, let's say, mutual zugzwang positions. So mutual zugzwang means neither side wants to move here. If black has to move, that means white has the opposition and white advances. If you're careful with the king, you can promote the pawn. If it's white to play, you have no way to advance. You have to, let's say, move to your side. But then black's king, of course, just chases you. Yeah. And no way to make progress. So this is a draw.
So then the skill then for black is just to learn how to get a draw out of a losing what could be a loss.
100%. Yeah, because you could, like, if you just start going this way with your king, then you're making it really easy for white to win.
Right.
But if you defend well, I think, like, under the 1,000 level, you'll actually draw a good number of your games because people just don't know this, or even if they know it, they might get nervous, they haven't practiced it enough, like, you will definitely hold some positions.
Yeah, my coach reviewed this with me, but, a couple of weeks ago we did some of these end games, and I remember she said how to turn the loss into a draw.
That's interesting. Similar. Yeah.
Similar.
No, it's absolutely possible to come back as long as you just kind of keep your king pretty much as active as possible. Always in front of the pawn, always in front of the other king. So,
Okay.
so we'll end with this. So this position, in theory, is very, very similar to kind of the first one we looked at in this series, this key position.
Mm-hmm.
So these are two key positions where the evaluation depends 100% on whose turn. Whichever king has to give ground basically loses the battle. And so same thing here. So last thing I'll kind of leave you with, just because this is maybe the end game that I see getting messed up the most often. Even at higher levels, actually, I feel like I've seen a player like 1500, 1800 resign this position, even though black was still drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a key type of situation. Again, you can get it. It doesn't really matter. Like the pawns can be here. We can flip the colors. It's more about the pattern. So what's happening in this position? White's king is about to win the pawn. And we're about to get an endgame with king and pawn against king. And it's up to black to make sure that their king is kind of in the right position to fight. So this is a question of timing. White's next move is going to be king takes pawn. Where do you want your king to be in order to meet this? White taking on d5.
I think d7.
Right. You want your king to be able to get to d7.
Yeah.
So that means in this position with black to play, how do we need to time this? Because white's next move is king takes d5, and then we want to meet that with our king d7 taking opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So how would we want to, what square does the king need to go to here?
What, the black? So wait, the next move is going to be that white king takes that pawn, right?
That's white's next move, right?
Okay, so then I'm going to the black king I'm going right to d7.
So if you go here,
opposite.
so again, it's a question of timing. Then white is taking.
Wait, then I'm giving white the opposition. So why don't I just go to d8 first?
Exactly. d8, c7 is also fine. As long as you're ready to come to this square, then you're holding this one. So this is a tricky one because, again, it's all about like timing, and the instinct is to approach, right? Try to get as close as possible. The instinct is also to resign because you're losing your last pawn. It feels like, oh no, white's king is active. But actually black is saving this one as long as you time it correctly. You get this position, and if you hold this one, you'll be making the draw. So
if you just jump to d7, then the white one's going to do that thing where it pushes you to the side.
Exactly.
So, got it.
We get this, and that's game over. So you see how like understanding this position allows you to kind of like work backwards and figure out other kind of slightly more complicated positions. Now you know, like, okay, here, hopefully you get this in one game and you'll remember our lesson, and you'll understand that, like, oh, I gotta be ready.
For sure. This is great. Yeah.
Okay, glad to hear it. Well, I think we should wrap up there because, yeah, it's going to be too much if we keep going.
Let me take one more minute of your time, though, because there's somebody that wants to say hi to you and to chat.
Absolutely.
I got Jedi Knights is here. Wants to say hi.
I had no idea.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Thanks for the lesson. That was awesome.
We got a 2-for-1. He sat there the whole time and listened to the lesson.
That's great.
But everyone got the lesson.
You guys were you guys live together?
Yes.
Well, then you can practice over the board. That would be really, really helpful.
It's hard to get him to do OTB. I love OTB.
Oh yeah. Well, you got to practice, especially if that's the goal, to play OTB.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kostya, for your time and for everything. This was awesome. Very helpful.
Absolutely. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope chat got a lot out of it. I hope YouTube got a lot out of it because I think it's a good lesson. I think we're going to put it on YouTube.
Yeah. It's going. It made those lines here deeper because it made me think a lot. But you see, I would rather just play, and not think so much. But this is going to save some games for me.
Awesome. Okay, so do you remember your homework? It was assigned earlier.
Yes, I'm going to do these king and pawn endings. And then I think you mentioned even I could try king and rook endings too, but definitely the king and pawn endings.
Yeah, do the king and pawn endgame drills, but most important thing, learn how to mate with a king and queen.
Mating with the king and queen.
Yeah, so that you can, you're at a level where you can checkmate anyone in the world. You could be playing Magnus. If you have a king and queen, you're mating him. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
You could be playing Stockfish 30, although Magnus I think is a more intimidating opponent.
I played that Charlotte tournament earlier. I told you with my new opening, and I beat that person over 400 rating points higher. I felt like I beat Magnus.
That's great.
So it's cool. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up here, guys. But thanks, Michiko, so much. And
Okay, you're welcome.
see you around.
Bye. Have a great night.
Absolutely. You too.